Hello, welcome to AP Sources Simplified. Today we're looking at a speech delivered by Theodore Roosevelt that outlined his political platform called New Nationalism. Before getting into the speech, let's take a look at the context. In the early 20th century, the Progressive Era began. Progressives at all levels of government and society set about to reform America. The previous era, the Gilded Age, saw great economic growth, but also produced a number of societal ills, including high income inequality, polluted cities, and a struggle for existence amongst the country's poor, who had almost no social welfare system to help them out. At the national political level, President Theodore Roosevelt led the charge to reform the country. He pushed through the Hepburn Act, which authorized the Interstate Commerce Commission to set the rates charged by railroads to their shipping customers, a direct reply to Tarbell's famous Rockefeller series. He got Congress to create the Department of Commerce and Labor with regulatory powers over large corporations and to pass legislation expediting prosecutions under the Sherman Antitrust Act. Responding to other muckraking journalism in McClure's magazine and elsewhere, he fostered passage of the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. Roosevelt's Justice Department filed suit against the Northern Securities Company under antitrust laws and brought the company down. It broke up Standard Oil and went after the beef trusts. Roosevelt was president for almost a full 2 terms, having served most of the assassinated McKinley's second term, and then Roosevelt won his own re-election. He promised not to run for a 3rd term, which he would later regret. Roosevelt was succeeded by Taft, a longtime friend of his. However, despite Taft carrying on progressive policies, the friendship between Taft and Roosevelt turned sour. And Roosevelt felt Taft was not an effective president. Roosevelt was still young by political standards and was incredibly active. His ideas about government and society post-presidency started taking an even more progressive turn. He outlines his ideas in his 1910 New Nationalism speech, which will serve as a precursor to another run for the presidency in 1912. A major overarching theme in Roosevelt's speech is that he believes the economic system should be structured in a way that every man has the opportunity to succeed and bring out their best self. He argues that government has a key role in shaping the economic system that will maximize opportunity. Roosevelt also connects that individual success will lead to national and even mankind success, and it is for everyone's responsibility to maximize their potential for not only themselves, but also the country. Teddy Roosevelt goes on to a brief discussion of U.S. history and the struggle to live up to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. He references the Civil War as a great turning point, but then turns to the struggle in his time period between capital, that being wealthy corporate leaders and management, against labor, that being workers and small family farmers of the country, struggling to get by. Throughout the speech, Roosevelt discusses special interest influence in politics, with special interest being corporations and wealthy individuals. He says there is a, quote, struggle of free men to gain and hold the right of self-government against the special interest, who twist the methods of free government into machinery for defeating the popular will, end quote. Then Teddy goes on to outline his square deal, which he says government should change the rules of the economy and society so there is more equality of opportunity for all citizens. Roosevelt then discusses specific issues and fixes for them. Possibly the greatest is to drive the special interest out of politics. That will need to happen to allow the reforms to pass, which include making corporations open their financial books to the public and not allow any spending on political campaigns by corporations. While Roosevelt makes clear he does not believe government should take over business, he does argue that government should have a powerful supervisory role over corporations. Teddy discusses the problems of income inequality, and while he does not fault those who are rich and believes it is good to strive for wealth, he thinks there should be limits. So he advocates for a graduated income tax on the wealthy. The cycle of financial panics and deep recessions seem to rock the country regularly, and Roosevelt would like it investigated and reforms to happen to end that cycle. While not a hallmark of the speech, Roosevelt does briefly discuss foreign policy and takes the same stance he has always had, which is the need for the U.S. to bolster its armed forces and act as an international policeman when need be. Another longtime favorite topic of Roosevelt is conservation of nature, which he argues is incredibly important, and the country's resources belong to the people, and they are not for the corporations to exploit and destroy. Finally, Roosevelt lays out some specific fixes, including limiting working hours, regulating child and women labor, common schools for book learning and daily life, laws for sanitary workplace conditions, and safety standards for products. Now, quickly taking a look at Roosevelt's intentions. First of all, Roosevelt is a progressive and former president. He has spent a lot of time thinking and speaking about politics in his speech. The speech is delivered in Kansas at a memorial for the famous abolitionist John Brown. It was a big event, which newspapers reported on, along with Roosevelt's speech. The purpose of the speech was to outline progressive policies. While Roosevelt had not yet announced he would run for the presidency again, he was keeping himself relevant in politics by giving such a high-profile political speech. Moving on to who would agree and disagree. Progressives, especially progressive Republicans, would agree with most of what Roosevelt was advocating for, while conservatives and possibly some progressive Democrats may disagree. The latter because they wanted to see government and corporations shrink instead of increasing the size of government. This is outlined by Woodrow Wilson's New Freedom speech, which will probably be my next video. Now, finally, the legacy of New Nationalism. Roosevelt harkens back to the Declaration of Independence and talks about the struggle the United States had living up to its words. That struggle came to head during the Civil War, in which Roosevelt quotes from Lincoln and then takes Lincoln's words to address the struggle in Roosevelt's time between capital and labor. Going forward, New Nationalism will also be incredibly influential to progressives. His policy proposals will be mainstays amongst progressive reformers and can be seen in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal in the 1930s and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society in the 1960s. Today, many on the left of the political spectrum, under labels like progressives, liberals, and Democrats, have similar viewpoints and positions. Okay, that went a little longer than I would expected, but there was a lot of ground to cover in New Nationalism. If you liked the video, please click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share with your friends.